Hey guys, George at SoundTraxx here, and today we're going to do a decoder install of our TSU-4400 into this Atlas RS3 in O scale. So let's get started. So to get started, on this model we're going to analyze the instructions, and according to the instructions there are 8 screws located on the underside of the body that we have to remove to get the shell off. So we're going to go ahead and take a Phillips head screwdriver and we're going to access these screws located on the underside of the body shell. And we're going to simply remove these screws and then we can lift the body shell off. So now that you've removed those screws, our shell will lift off easily and be taken out of the way. But before we do that, we want to remove the fuel tank and get that out so we can access where the speaker mounts. So underneath you're going to notice there's 4 screws that hold this fuel tank in place. So we're going to take those out. Now once we've removed these 4 screws, our fuel tank simply lifts away. But you'll notice that there's a speaker inside of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our shell over, we're going to remove the shell, and we're going to find the wires that are going to our speaker. And we're going to simply unplug this, so that way we can take our speaker and set it aside. Now once we've removed our shell, we can also identify what each of the wires are. For example, our red and black wires are for track pickup. Our blue and yellow wires are for the motor connections. And then of course from inside the shell we have our headlight and backup light. Now once we've properly identified which wires are which, now what we can do is cut those away from this dummy circuit board, and we're going to take that out and set it to the side. Now that we've removed the 4 screws, we can simply take our PCB and set it aside. Now we've got a great place here to mount the TSU-4400. Now before we mount our decoder, let's take care of the speaker first. Now inside the fuel tank you'll notice that they actually have about a 2.5-inch round speaker. But if you look at the back, it's marked at 1 watt. Which means if we take our 4400 with 3-watt amplifier and pushed it through there to get it loud, it potentially could burn up the speaker. So to dissipate this, we're going to take 2 of our 28mm by 40mm oval speakers and the gaskets, and we're going to mount them in the tender in place of the speaker. So first, to do this, there are 2 screws that hold the speaker in place. So we're just going to simply remove these. And then we can simply separate the halves and take the speaker out and set it aside. So now that we have our speakers removed from the packaging, we're going to take our gaskets and we're going to put it on the face of the speaker just like this. So the first step is going to be to remove the adhesive backing on one side of the speaker gasket. And we can take a knife and just peel up a little bit of the corner, and then we can simply peel the backing off. And that's going to leave a sticky surface that we can then line up and match up to our speaker. Just like that. So now we're going to do that a second time. Now inside this body shell of the fuel tank, this speaker actually fits perfect. So with 2 of those back there, we're going to have fantastic sound. So again, to mount this, all we need to do is take the backing off of the other side of the gasket with our knife. Just very carefully peel it up. And we're going to take this and we're going to mount this into the front of the fuel tank right there along the floor. And the adhesive sticky will help hold these fuel tank halves together. So we're going to do the same thing for the second speaker. So now inside there we have 2 speakers lined up side by side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the workshop and we're going to wire these up in series, which means we're going to take our positive speaker wire and go to the positive terminal on the first speaker. We're going to take the negative terminal of the first speaker and jump her to the positive terminal on the second speaker. And then we're going to take the negative terminal of the second speaker and wire that back up to the decoder. So let's go do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tin the end of the wire. So we're going to take the insulation and we're just going to strip a little bit of the end off of it. And then we're going to do that with the other wire. Now we're going to twist the ends of the wire. Then we're going to take a little bit of flux, so we're going to put it here on the end. And we're going to take our soldering iron, clean it off, and take a little bit of the solder on the end of the tip of the iron, and then we're going to tin the end of the wire right there, just like that. Now once the wire is tinned, we can trim that to length, because we don't want a whole lot of extra wire sticking out, just like that. So now we're going to make our connections to our speakers. So we're going to put a little bit of solder flux onto these joints. Now we're going to take our red wire and we're going to go to the positive side of the speaker on the speaker 1. We're going to take the negative wire and go to the negative side of speaker 2. Now for the wire in between, we're going to take this small cut of red wire. We're just going to jumper just like that. So this end of the wire is already tinned, so we're going to take the other end, we're going to trim it short. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to tin the end of it. So we're going to strip the insulation, twist the ends to make sure there's no fray wires. Put a little bit of solder flux on there. Grab our soldering iron and some solder, and there, the end of the wire is tinned. Now to prevent burning my fingers, I'm going to use a pair of tweezers when I'm mounting this wire to these terminals on the speaker. And that's it. So once we've wired our speakers up, let's mount that back down to the frame. So we're going to take our speaker wires and we're going to thread them through the hole where the original speaker wires came through. Then we can line it up and we'll reattach the 4 screws that held the fuel tank in place. So now that the speaker is back in place, we have our speaker wires and we have the rest of the wires for the model. So let's mount our TSU-4400. So for this locomotive, we're using our TSU-4400 for Alco. This is part number 885019. This already has the sounds of the Alco RS3 pre-programmed into it, so this will be a quick and easy installation. So once we have the decoder out of the package, all we need to do is mount it to the frame. So looking at this frame right here, this looks like a fantastic place to mount this decoder. So we're going to take some double stick tape and we're going to mount this down to the frame. Now on the underside here, you're going to see these solder pads where the connector header goes through the decoder. We're going to use this as the mount so that way we're not touching double stick tape to any of the components on there. So if we do need to remove it, we can remove it easily. So what we're going to do is we're just going to set that here and we're going to get some tape and we're going to line up and mount the decoder. So once we have our tape in place, all we have to do is press the decoder in place. Now I used multiple layers of this particular tape because it was relatively thin. The double stick foam tape that you choose may be a different thickness, and so you can adjust that for yourself. So again, all we have to do is line this up and simply press it into place. Now this is a metal frame, so we want to make sure that we're isolated far enough away so that none of the metal parts on the frame are touching the components on the decoder. Now the next task is we're going to take these wires and screw them into place in the terminals. So now to make the attachment for the wires, we're simply going to trim and tin our wires again, just like we did in the previous step. Now we're going to take our track pickup wires and attach them to the track pickup terminals. Oops. Now once we've finished connecting the track power and the motor leads, you can go ahead and test it to make sure that your decoder works just fine. Once we've done that, now we can install the speaker wires. So we're going to take these two wires that we have coming from our speaker, and we're going to attach those to the S plus and the S minus. So we're going to measure this roughly. We're going to add about a ½ an inch to give us some play. We'll cut the ends, and again we'll repeat our process. We'll strip and tin the ends of the wire, and we'll mount it in place. Now once you've installed your speaker wires, now's a good time to test it again to make sure our sound and motor are all working. Now once we strip the ends of the positive wire, we can actually twist these wires together and tin them together since they're both common. And we'll tin the ends just like that. Now we'll take them and insert them into the V plus terminal. Now on each of these black wires we're going to install a resistor to make sure that we can protect our LED. So for these we're going to use a 1000 ohm resistor, and we're going to attach it to the ends of these wires. So again we're going to twist and tin the end. Now we're going to get our resistor. And the leads on these resistors are very long, so we don't need to use all of that. So we can cut those short. We can discard the extra. Now before we install this, we're going to slide heat shrink tubing over the installation. Now using our heat shrink tubing kit, we can take a section of heat shrink tubing off, just like that. We're going to slide that over the wire before we solder to it. Now once we have that done, we can take our resistor and solder it to the end of the black wire on each side. So again, we can tin the end of our resistor, a little solder on here. And just like that. So once I've soldered my resistor, I'm going to take my heat shrink tubing, I'm going to slide it over the connection, and then I'm going to take the barrel of the soldering iron, and we're going to run it over the edge here to heat it up and shrink the insulation down. And that way we make sure that we've got a good, clean, and protected connection on our resistor to make sure that none of that is exposed and potentially could cause issues. Now these black wires are actually a little short, so I'm going to add some extra black wire to the other side of this. So to do this, you're going to follow the same procedure, and then we'll tie it into the HL and the BL terminals. So now once we've got our wires extended, we can simply attach these to the headlight and the backup light terminals respectively. Now once we've tested and everything works great, the last step is to install our SoundTraxx current keeper. We have a 2-pin connector right here on the side of our TSU-4400 that we can simply take our current keeper and plug it into place. Now we can take some double stick tape again and we can mount the current keeper down to the frame in a place to make sure that it doesn't rattle around inside the shell. Once we remove our backing, we take our current keeper, route the wires to make sure that it's not going to interfere with the shell. We're putting back the shell in place. And we simply mount it down. Now we can take our shell, tuck in, make sure all the wires are up and out of the way. And now we can replace the 8 screws we removed to put the shell back in place. So all that's left is to fire it up and test run it. We have sound. We're going to move in the forward direction, and this locomotive is long hood forward. So it runs forward, runs in reverse. Our lights work in both directions. And now all we need to do is finish the setup process. We'll be doing another video on this setup later. Thanks for watching. If you have any further questions, please visit our website at SoundTraxx.com, and under the Manuals tab, you'll see the Tsunami2 and Econami installation guide right there at the top of the page for tips and hints on things that you can do during your installations.